We're just goofing off here and before we go to bed.
You guys are easy to talk to, though.
And I've been on a couple of other podcasts in the past few months, and it's very nice to come home. I Google myself, which you should probably do.
Just not too often.
I remember the day I realised I was a top Jonathan Downey on Google, and I was so pleased with myself because I beat like a college basketball player.
The top Jonathan Downey.
You should have edited this. You see me mute myself when I'm not talking. It's because there's a train that goes by here, and I try to minimize it.
Oh, that's scary.
This is where all the outtakes usually come from.
I was wondering how you do that. Okay.
This is the fun bit.
I'll be careful what I say. No, that's the only reason that I decided that I would do a podcast at all. Is I was like, I'm not touching the editing ever.
I've never yet done an intro in one take, so it's not going to be anything abnormal. This is Troublesome Terps, a podcast about topics that keep interpreters up at night. I'm your resident rowdy Scott Jonathan Downey. Here in our virtual studio, we have a mostly full lineup. First up, our Munich maven, Alexander Gansmeyer.
Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again in our virtual studio. I like that.
Also with us, of course, is our resident tech head and podcast wizard and tablet interpreter, Alexander Drexel.
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you all, at least virtually, and talk to you in the virtual studio.
It's very tech forward that you're here so virtually and digitally.
Right? Yes, in these difficult times. Let's not talk about that, though.
No, let's not. No. Is coronavirus the new hashtag Brexit?
I'm just glad we're not interpreters versus machines.
Yes. Moving right along.
I think it's you moving it along, Alex, though.
I know, I was just sort of getting ready for this. But I wanted to let you know that we have a very special guest today, the president-elect of ATA, the American Translators Association, a freelance translator and a fellow podcaster, actually. Welcome to Madalena Zampaulo. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
It's great having you because I've been following your show for a while now and really enjoy it. It's called Smart Habits for Translators.
Smart Habits for Translators, yeah.
I kind of like that you went with the habits thing. What was that your idea, or where did it come from?
Originally, it was my idea. I actually had an idea for another project related to habits for translators. And I was talking to Veronica. We've worked with each other on some other things before in the past. And so we decided, let's talk about something that nobody else is really talking about, which is related to work-life clarity and not just, business and marketing and the things that people expect, or, when it comes to something related to translation or interpreting. This is what you see a lot online now. I mean, it's kind of becoming more and more. So we launched it in October of last year, 2019. And now we have listeners, I think, in over 40 countries.
Wow.
It's a pretty cool feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. And people are telling us that even though it's, smart habits for translators, that it's actually, applicable to interpreters. And even, I think we've even had photographers and graphic designers tell us the same thing.
That's cool.
Yeah. That is awesome.
And I must admit, you shouldn't go by the stats, but it's lovely when you look up the stats. And, although the nicest thing which you'll get soon is when you go to our conference and people say the immortal words, which I've now had twice. I've never seen your face, but I would know that voice anywhere.
See?
Yeah, that's nice.
No, the stats are only important to us to know, if people are picking up on it. And so, yeah, for the 40 countries, since it's just been, 5 months? For us, that felt like pretty good. Almost
That's
6
pretty
months.
good.
Yeah.
It is pretty good, yeah. And as I said, I really like that you go with the habits approach, and also, you said you call it work-life clarity, because work-life balance is a bit of an overstretched term, I suppose. So what you're focusing on, it seems to me, is that it's really about clarity. So I kind of like that approach. Right. Yeah, but tell us a little bit about yourself. You're based in California, is that right?
Yeah, I'm based in Southern California. I live in Orange County, which is about 2 hours north of San Diego, about 45 minutes away from Los Angeles.
And you're a freelance translator?
Yeah, I'm a freelance translator. I do Spanish and Portuguese, medical and life sciences translations into English. And I also have a small boutique translation company that I work with other translators in different languages as well.
Okay. And how did you move into the medical and life sciences field? Is that something that you've always had in your pocket somewhere? Or?
No, actually, no. I started as a medical interpreter, believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, in the very beginning. So when I finished my graduate degree, I started as a medical interpreter, mostly doing, like well baby appointments and things like that, building up little by little. I did some community interpreting as well, especially for organizations like I started in Louisville, Kentucky, actually. So there was an organization there called the Center for Women and Families. So I would go there often and help to interpret a lot of their meetings that they would have, support meetings and things like that, and for their advocates and so on. But then I also worked as a project manager. I've actually had a lot of roles. So I worked as a project manager and scheduling interpreters. So it got to the point where I was so busy scheduling interpreters that I was interpreting a little bit less, but then when somebody couldn't go, I was the person who would go for the Spanish English appointments. Of course, there's not a lot of Portuguese in Louisville, Kentucky, so I didn't do any of that. But then, I transitioned into translation after we moved. My husband was doing his PhD at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. And I moved there with him, and I had a background in teaching languages, actually. So I worked for Ohio State University there, and I taught Spanish and Portuguese language courses, but I realized that's not what I wanted to be doing full time, long term. So I had been doing some translation as well, and I got to the point where I could transition into doing it full time, and that was the end of that.
Very cool.
That is very cool.
We just said that you're the president-elect of ATA now. How soon did you start working in the association? Was that something that was sort of always important to you, or?
Yeah, actually, I joined ATA when I started freelance translating. I became the administrator of the medical division of ATA, which has over 3,000 members. To give you an idea, the association itself is about 10,000 members. And so the medical division's got, I think it's over 3. If it's not over 3, it's right around 3.
Those numbers are insane, because I think AIC has like 3,000 members worldwide total. So it's
globally.
crazy. Yeah.
The last time I looked at ITI, they were 3,000 and something. Yeah, it's crazy.
So, but with the medical division, I mean, you're covering medical translators and interpreters. So, right, because we have an interpreters division as well, which is over 4,000 people.
That's again huge. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, and so I was administrator of that division for 4 years, and then I transitioned into working in different roles. So I was the public relations chair also for 4 years. I've been on the board as a director before I became president-elect as well.
That's really cool. So in all those different roles, you really got to see the entire association inside and out from different perspectives. Yeah,
it's really interesting. I think it helps when you want to volunteer your time and give so much of your time to an association to really see it from different aspects, if you have the time and the interest to do it, right? But, now I think that experience has helped a lot, because just being on the board alone, you see a much bigger picture of the association. But when you're actually serving in the different roles, and now I'm the chair of the membership committee as well, it's one of those things that you look at and you go, okay, this is a much bigger ship than, people see from the outside, and how it functions in relevance to the people who are members.
I was going to say, I spent 6 years on the ITI board, and the one thing that I learned was what you think is possible when you've not been in a leadership position, and what you know is possible when you are in that position are two entirely different things completely.
Yep.
And people will make criticisms based on what they want done, and 99 times out of 100, everyone on the board wants to do that same thing. But as you said, it's a big ship to steer, and so sometimes you say either something like yes but not now, which people always interpret as no, or you actually we would. The favourite answer with a couple of questions that we got was, we would love to. Now, how much would you like your membership to go up by?
Yes, that's a good point.
That sort of gave people a different perspective.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, that is one thing, is that I'm somebody who produces a lot of ideas, so I've been on both sides of that. So, I'll say, can we do this? Can we do that? And then when you start to actually see the numbers, you go, okay, maybe that was kind of a pipe dream, or maybe we need to work towards that like longer term strategy. But your priorities become very clear after you see how things work. Yeah.
It's really funny though, because everybody who was in an association in like a managerial capacity always said the same thing. Because we've had a few people on there. We had like the chair of the German Association of Conference Interpreters on, and also of the German chapter of AIC, and they said very, very similar things. Also, the chair of ITI. It's always the perspectives are always very different if you're quote unquote just a member and if you're actually working from within the organization. It's really funny. That's just true across the board, it seems.
So people wait for associations to do things. And I've realized some things, and I'm maybe going to be controversial here. I haven't said that word for a few episodes. But some things I think are actually better achieved by a small group of individuals who just get stuff done.
Very true.
Sometimes, yeah.
There are some things that the association is only able to do. Only an association can represent the profession. But, going to individual conferences, going to individual meetings, making contacts, that's something the individual members should be great at.
Yeah.
And, if there's some contacts, feed them back. But waiting for, why were you not at this event? Why were you not at that event? Well, the question for the members is, why don't you go? You can achieve just as much going as an individual member as you can waiting for the association to be able to afford a stand.
Yeah. And when you find something that's really important to you and you think, well, I want this to get done, or I want the association to do this, it's kind of like, okay, are you willing to volunteer and help with that?
Yes.
And that comes up, and then sometimes you see people back off a little bit, and other times you see where the energy comes from. Like, we have one division that's pretty new, the audiovisual division, and they are just super active, like everywhere. They're having events all over the world that they're organizing, but kind of remotely, and they're doing an excellent job.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think one part of being president-elect of ATA is also that you get to be or have to be the organizer of the conference. Isn't that true?
Yes,
that seems like such a daunting task to me. It's such a huge conference. I've only been once, but I can only imagine how much work goes into preparing that every year. I mean, it's every year, so.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think that most people realize it's a big amount of work, but it's another one of those things that until you're in the role, I mean, honestly,
when you do it yourself.
It's funny. So we, President-elect will organize 2 conferences. So I have the one this year in Boston, and I think next year, I think we're in Minneapolis, but the bigger cities tend to attract more people as well, and that's expected. But this year, for example, we just closed the call for proposals. We had 494 proposals to review. Yeah, still a lot. But at the same time, the planning of it literally starts during the previous conference even, because I think I was elected, and the next day I had a few meetings already, and I was asking to make decisions about this coming year's conference already. So, I mean, I knew it was in the works, it was coming up, but I didn't realize how immediate it was, because it does take a lot to organize. Yeah. But, the staff at our association, they do the legwork. They really make it happen.
Hats off to all you guys.
Yes,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then somehow you still find time to do the podcast now as well. And you also provide training. Is it mostly online training, or do you also have like training courses in real life, as it were?
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for asking that. I teach mostly online. I kind of had a background already in online teaching. When I was teaching languages, a lot of that was shifting at the universities to online courses, which is not the best. I can say that. It was one of those things, actually, it was very frustrating to try to teach language courses online. At one point, I had a couple of courses that each had 60 students in it, which each one. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. But, I've also taught courses online that have between 8 and 25 students. So, I mean, it really just depends on what it is and the structure. But now what I teach online is related to topics for translators mostly. And some interpreters also take my courses as well. Like the one that I teach twice a year right now, that I'm considering maybe putting online as something that people can buy at any time of the year, because it is quite popular. I get requests for it the whole year when I'm not teaching it, is my T&I website blueprint course. And that's the course that tends to be very popular because, translators and interpreters know that they need a website oftentimes, or they wanted to always put one together, or they stalled out a few times, and that's something that they really want to make happen. But the other, I've also taught some webinars that are available. So one is about blogging, maintaining a blog, because that's of interest to some translators as well. And the other one is about growing your business through LinkedIn, using LinkedIn.
That's a perfect segue, actually. So thank you for that.
So-
Because we're right at the topic that we're going to discuss tonight, which is having a website and just being present online in various ways. And we've been doing this topic for a while, I think. And then I sort of thought, well, you would be the perfect guest to do this. So
Yes.
thanks for joining us. And I guess one question that I would ask to all the freelancers in the virtual studio is what your approach was. And I'd be interested as well in hearing from Alex and Jonathan. When you started out in the profession, was it immediately clear to you, or did people tell you, this is one of the first things you need to do, is you need to have a website? Or what did it feel like when you started out in terms of being present online?
Okay, I think I might start with a story. So for the first couple of years, I basically had a prose profile and a Translators Cafe profile.
Oh my God, yes.
Because oddly enough, though, I had rewritten my church's website in bare HTML, no CMS, all hand-coded. Every single letter on that website I put in myself. I was so proud of myself.
Those were the days, yes.
And then what happened was I realized that I needed a website when 10 years ago last month, I ended up in 5 national newspapers, 2 national TV channels, and CBC Radio Canada within the same week. And I realized at that point that I had practically zero web presence to do anything with all that coverage that I was getting. So I built myself a website in WordPress because I knew WordPress because I had like a personal blog for ages, and it was grey on grey color scheme. I've actually found it in the Internet Archive because I put it in my new book as an example of what not to do. And literally the homepage was, welcome to the homepage of Integrity Languages, where you will find the information on integrity languages.
Well done.
Pretty straightforward, I'd say.
Yeah.
And it was only about 2015, 2016 that I managed to get the money together and pay a brother of one of my good friends to do a proper website. He is a professional web designer, and literally within like 6 months of it coming out, it won awards. It's been getting really good feedback. I still fiddle with it now, and I wish I'd done it earlier. But then I think if I'd done it earlier, I wouldn't have known how to do it right. Doing it that far into my career meant I knew exactly what I wanted it to do. I knew exactly who I wanted to target. I knew exactly what budget I had to get it right, and I was able to be much more focused. I think if I'd professionally designed it on day one, it would have still been grey on grey and rubbish. Although I wish I had it earlier, I'm glad I did the journey to get it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you on that, because my first website, like I started out the same way. I had a prose profile, like a Translators Cafe profile, and then just like, put myself on LinkedIn.
Do you guys still have those, by the way? Sorry.
I think those profiles still exist. I never deleted them.
I think mine do too, but I don't even remember how to log in anymore. It's been that many years.
Exactly. So
Can't get rid of it.
it's kind of an orphan. Yeah. It's kind of like a MySpace profile. I still have that one because I never deleted it.
If Bebo was still alive, I'd still have a Bebo profile. My prose profile, every 6 months I update it because they send me begging emails to update it, and also because I do the occasional webinar for them. The only emails I get through it now are, would you like to be a search analyst or whatever guff it is nowadays?
That's fun. Yeah, but so basically that was kind of my introduction as well. And then when I moved back over to Germany and started really interpreting full time, one of the first things that I did was I got in touch with a friend of mine who, back then he was doing websites. I think now he's actually like a software engineer or something. So he's kind of switched gears a little bit. But then I downloaded this free HTML5 template, which was responsive and everything, and it looked really cool. But then I helped him he helped me, I should say, kind of design it around my web presence, but it was a one-pager, so it wasn't really anything special. It looked cool. It was, responsive and everything. And I, kind of similar to Jonathan, I learned how to do like the HTML5 coding enough to be able to fiddle around with the text and insert new pictures and stuff. But CMS, to me, that was always a complete mystery. Like I never was able to do that. And that worked, but then eventually it kind of got boring. And also it was just, it wasn't much. It was a one-pager. And now I've moved on to Squarespace. And I love Squarespace. It's really, really cool.
Team Squarespace represent. They should sponsor us.
They should sponsor us.
Am I the only person who still thinks WordPress is cool?
So I have an opinion on WordPress, and I'm about to talk about that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spare that for later. I'm a big fan of WordPress too, but an even bigger fan of Squarespace.
I am not. Yeah. So Squarespace, I
I'm not
did
a fan
that.
either.
Yeah. But apparently, what is it? Like 30% of the web runs on WordPress?
Yeah.
So I went to Squarespace, and similar to you, Jonathan, I think if I'd actually gotten someone to do it for me earlier, it wouldn't have come out the way that it is now, and I'm very happy with the way that it is right now. And I did everything myself, which makes me even happier and even prouder. And it took a long time, but then I think I could have probably just like churn it out in like a month or so, but then I just wanted it to be right, because this is a much bigger website than I had earlier with much more, subsites and what have you. And so I just wanted it to be right. And I have 2 user experience researchers who are friends of mine. And I was like, listen, look at my website before I put this online. I have another friend of mine who's a graphic designer. And I was like, look at this. Can I make this better somehow? So even though I did it myself, I actually got some experts on board at the very last minute. And then they were like, okay, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And I was like, so that's how it worked out. And I like it. I'm pretty proud.
Cool.
But I feel like it's a necessity. I mean, I know a lot of colleagues who don't have websites because they've just been in business for eons. And they legit just don't need a website because they just don't need it. But I think if you've not been in the business for like 35 years, then a website is a must.
When I see people who have a website, what really irks me is if they have a website, but they still have a free email address.
Yes.
So for me, if you have a website, so like I have integritylanguages.co.uk, one thing that I make sure that I have is I have the email address with @integritylanguages.co.uk.
I so agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, it concerns me because I've had times where I've been contacting people for large amounts of work, and I feel uncomfortable saying to a client, referring a client to, this is the best interpreter and such. Oh yeah, their address is at yahoo.com.
Or Hotmail.
Yes, I was thinking of Hotmail.
Hotmail is the worst.
Yahoo and Hotmail are like, they really make me worry. Gmail, I'll go maybe okay, but if you've got Yahoo, Hotmail, it's like, and especially if they have a really nice website with their own URL, you think,
yeah,
why
have you not? If you've bought the domain anyway, pay the extra 20 quid a year or whatever to have your email at that address too. It just makes sense.
But then on the flip side, I get very irked at people who have their own email address. I don't know, like jonathan@downey.co.uk. And then I click on, then I'm like, haha, I want to see his website. So
and they don't have one.
And they don't have one. And I'm like, why? This is so weird. I don't get it.
It is weird. Yeah.
Or the worst one is when it just says this space is reserved, and it's like, so you do own the domain, but you haven't done anything with it.
It's like a construction sign. That's the GIF that we use. Anyway, It feels like Madalena is trying to jump in there. I don't know if you wanted to.
No. It's just I completely agree. Well, first of all, to talk about WordPress, my very first site was on WordPress too, and I didn't take the time to learn coding, and I didn't want to.
Well, that's the idea, right?
Yeah. And so over time, I did my first website. It wasn't great. I think everybody's first website is really kind of probably rough, especially because mine was at least 10 years ago as well. And then from there, I needed somebody to help me with coding and things like that. So I hired somebody to do that. That new websites could do that for me. Problem was, the only thing that I could update myself was my blog. So I couldn't make any other changes. And when I wanted changes, I had to wait for his schedule to be able to work the changes in. Even if I found like a random typo or something, I couldn't change it myself necessarily without worrying that I was going to mess everything up when it came to the code. So I just said, this is not a good idea. But it took me a long time to get off of WordPress. And when I found Squarespace, it's like, okay, this is it. I'm moving my website. So I don't remember when I started using Squarespace, but several years ago. And I tell everybody that now. So even with the website course I teach, like, you don't have to use Squarespace, but that's what I teach is using it in Squarespace. You can still get a lot from the course, but you're going to have to figure out on your own if you're going to use other website builders or other website, something like that needs code. And there are some people who've taken it that have done really well with code, but that's not my strength, and it's not something I'm interested in learning. But it's true what you say too about email addresses. I mean, it's such a minor thing. It's like, if you're going to pay the $200 or so a year for your site, what's $20 more? You get that back in one job a few times over at least. And so it's like, why not? But Jonathan, I think you're the first person now that I met who has probably as long of an email address as me. So.
This. I mean, there was such a debate about that. I picked the business name about 12 years ago now, and even if I wanted to change it now, I probably couldn't. Now, I must admit, I'm still Team WordPress. One, because I haven't tried Squarespace. Two, because I had to do some work for a university and they were using Joomla.
Oh,
And Joomla is torture.
yes.
And so the thought now of learning another CMS, now that I know everything, now that I've got WordPress set up how I like it, and the way that my designer set it up, I can do the edits in code myself, it's fine. The thought of moving to another CMS is just like, I don't want to go through the Joomla stuff again. But I think that's the thing is, it's finding what works for you and what allows you to change it as your priorities change. I've realized I thought when you wrote the text of the pages on the website, it would stay static.
Oh, yeah.
And you would never touch it again. And actually, for a while, I was changing my homepage like every month. Now I've kind of let it settle for a while, and it's a case of, you know what? Now I know my position, I'm going to slowly make changes. And at the moment, I'm concentrating on doing blogging in the position that I want. But now I'm like, well, now I'm learning more and more every day about the kind of people I want to work with. I know what I can do with the text of the website to make it work.
Yeah.
And any idea that once you write a page, that's it static forever. Oh boy, no. If only.
But it's funny what you just said, because I remember spending so much time fiddling around with pages and working on something and trying to figure stuff out, especially in the early days with HTML. And now I have no patience for that whatsoever. I'm so happy that I can just pick a template, put in some content, and be done with it.
Yeah. You can do coding in the Squarespace templates, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
There were so many things that I wanted to get to, so I'm trying to do it in the right order, I guess. So I suppose one of the questions that would be interesting to me is the whole question of whether you kind of do it yourself, because that's what we were getting into there a little bit, or whether you should pay a professional, because that's what interpreters always say is, don't just ask your friend who knows 2 languages or something to interpret, get a professional. So should we do the same with a website, or is it enough to get a website builder or something like Squarespace or WordPress.com? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that, I've done both. So for me, it was, I did get people to help me with like my logo and certain design elements and branding and things like that. But when it comes to having control of what goes on your website without having to pay somebody to constantly keep it updated, for me, that was important. I'm never going to tell somebody like, don't use a professional. That's never going to be the case. But at the same time, there are certain things you can do with your website. And that's why they've created, things like this out of the box, like Squarespace, for people to be able to have that kind of control. I still have somebody that when I don't have time to make big updates to my website, I pay a designer to actually help me with that. Something that I can do myself even now because I know Squarespace so well. But if I don't have the time to do it, I do hire somebody to help me with that. And also it helps that the person knows design, like they studied design, right? But I do think it's empowering for translators and interpreters to have that control, because not everybody's like Jonathan and likes coding and can do that. Most of us probably don't. So it's one of those things that we have to like weigh out. It's like you said, you can't have static web pages forever. You really do need to keep updating your website. And so having that control, I talked to somebody just yesterday, one of my course students, we were going over her finished website and I was giving her little suggestions on what to tweak. And she said she's been waiting to get her website going for 10 years. And she's like, finally, now I feel like I can be proud of this and share this with my clients.
So great.
It's just very interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's also one thing that is the big advantage of a content management system like, even Squarespace or Joomla or WordPress or Drupal or whatever you want to use, is that you can separate between the design and the layout and the content, and then you can give the sort of layout and design stuff to a designer or a professional, where you can take care of the content, you can update it, you can change the copy, or start a blog or whatever it may be. I think that's the big advantage that people have there as well.
Yeah.
And I think as well, I would recommend that, because the coding that I do is kind of basic HTML formatting and watching where things are going to land. And there's something to be said for at least understanding kind of basic HTML, like hitting bold. What was that? I wrote a really long blog post recently and I checked the HTML so that I could put in an anchor so that someone could skip to halfway down. Those little tweaks actually are really helpful. And I think some CMSs let you do that natively, but if you know yourself, this is how I do it. I just looked it up to check I was doing it right. If you know how to do that, it means that you can put in features that aren't natively in your CMS that just make make things easier to read. So I would say to people, know a little bit about what's going on in the background. Learn like what's the HTML for bold, for a hyperlink, for an internal link, just so that you can add little features if you need to. But yeah, it's great when you can separate content and layout and understand what each is doing.
We have to get you on Squarespace. You don't have to know of any of that stuff. You could just add it with a click of a button.
Do you have a coupon code, Madalena? You should probably have your own coupon code.
I know. I don't think they even do that, but if they do, I should get one.
Yeah, right. What do you call it?
Affiliate code.
Affiliate. That's what I was looking for. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because I, just like you, Madalena, I now have experience with doing it myself on Squarespace and also using an agency, like a web design agency, because I just launched another website with a colleague of mine because we just formed this sort of network with 4 teams in Germany. So we have like one overarching team website, and then all the teams have their individual website, and they all look alike. So basically, it was kicked off by one of the teams. They already had the template done with the agency, so we basically just kind of hooked into that and adjusted it with regional content for us. And it was okay. I think what I liked about it was that the agency was very responsive. So if ever we needed anything, they did it relatively quickly. But with that, there was also a little bit of sloppiness involved. That if it had just been me, I could have fixed it easily. But then you always have to go and do that little loop. You're like, okay, I need this done. They do it. You still find another mistake. You got to go back to them. And then they got to. So there's a lot of that redundancy in there, and it's on WordPress. And they gave us the login details because I said I need the login details. I need to be able to if there's a comma missing, I don't want to have to write you an email. I wanted to be able to do it myself.
Right.
So to that point, I've figured it out. But I think it's just incredibly complicated. I also really didn't have the time or patience so far to kind of sink my teeth into it, but it's not intuitive.
Nope.
Even just looking through it and, if I want to add a link to something or kind of redirect a link on the website, I probably could figure it out because it's WordPress. I'm sure there's a gazillion YouTube tutorials on everything that you could possibly know or want to know. But it is not intuitive.
And their help team is really good. Their support team is great.
That's good to know.
Oh, yeah. I think I've used them twice only, but they're excellent and they get back to you immediately. Yeah.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so that's a bit challenging.
Yeah, it's interesting because as well as the design elements of a website, that question of what should be on it, and I'm beginning to form the opinion, in fact, I think, and yes, I did write it in my new book, that...
What? You write books?
If you look at... two so far. I mentioned that I kind of did this joke experiment that I tried to find interpreters' websites, which is hard enough anyway. And then when I looked at them, I realized that if you took the headshot of one interpreter's website and put it on another one, no one would know the difference. You could literally change the names over and the website wouldn't change. And it's because interpreters and translators often put the same things on their website that aren't necessarily relevant.
Yep, that's true.
Where you got your degrees from, probably most clients won't care. The fact that you've loved languages since you had a hamster at the age of 6. It's really? I have a passion for proofreading.
Yep.
No, you're a grammar nerd. That's a different thing.
But what should be? I mean, aren't there some standards that should be on more or less every page?
I think so.
I mean, I agree that you not every interpreter needs to explain the difference between consecutive and simultaneous because there are so many sources for this, but aren't there some things that need to be more or less there, some defaults? I don't know.
I think there definitely are a lot of defaults, but I think a lot of the times, especially interpreters and translators, think that the rules of modern website design don't apply to us.
Ooh. Shade.
Because right now everything is visual, and usually websites are kind of white or at least very
Yeah,
very
minimal.
one-colored, very minimal, not a lot of text. And then
Yes.
you will just have these websites that are like, like Jonathan was saying earlier, like that was your website 10 years ago. Those are still a ton of websites out there that are gray and gray, no pictures, with like 20 paragraphs of text.
Yeah.
And you're like, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, so I think, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that's true. And sometimes, I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago in person with a bunch of translators and interpreters, and a couple of them really got it. And they said, well, yeah, you talk about websites all the time. Like, this needs to be more up to date and more, dynamic and engaging. And I said, yeah. And then somebody laughed because I was mentioning the fact that a lot of these websites, I mean, it's almost as if you visit them and you go, does this person still work? Are they still in business?
Yeah,
because
totally.
It's so old. No, I mean, it's just so old that you think, well, it's just a bunch of text, or they don't want to put their headshot on it. I mean, I don't understand that part very well, but that's something I find a lot. And actually, even among my website students, this kind of bothers me a little bit, because I think, well, don't you want to see who you're going to be hiring and who you're going to be working with? I mean,
exactly.
But to be fair, this also cuts both ways, because there are a lot of websites that have the headshot on there. And I know the colleague, and I know that's what they looked like 25 years ago. That is not what they look like anymore. And I know for a fact that's why they don't change it anymore. And so that kind of, I don't want to be shady, but that's just the truth.
It's more flattering.
It is more flattering. And they're great pictures, so I get it.
Am I the only person who's been embarrassed at a conference by someone who's saying, don't you recognize me? And the real answer is, I recognize you 10 years ago. I don't recognize you now.
No,
yeah,
exactly.
That's true.
But I mean, one of the things that I realized when I was building this website is we talk way too much about ourselves.
Yes, that's the thing.
So I realized, and I was talking to marketing people, I think it was when I was at a CIOL marketing event or something, when someone said, and I can't remember who it was, I wish I could quote them, said, your website should be more about what you do for your clients than who you are yourself.
Yes. Yep, definitely.
And they're like, if you're front and center, then the only person who's going to buy from you is you. If your clients and what you can do for them is front and center, then you have a reason to talk about you, because later on you get to justify why you're the right person to do that. And so I started writing my front page, and I've rewritten it 3 times since then, going, okay, let's put them front and center. Let's put their needs there. And I got a criticism. Someone wrote me an email after my website had been up about 18 months, and they went, you don't have your all the universities you got your degrees from on your front page, and you don't say how you became an interpreter on your front page. I'm like, yeah, because no one cares.
Yeah, nobody cares.
Okay.
The people who care about that are us, each other.
Yes, exactly.
It's
Definitely.
like, it's true. Our clients are not looking for that. Like, where did they go to school, or what did they do, and how did they get into this? But it's true that a lot of times, even my students, I tell them they don't care, that you were so excited about learning Spanish at a young age. It's nice to know that, but it's not something that you need to take up that, online real estate with. There's other things you could be telling people. What they really want to know is how you're getting them results, or how you're helping them overcome the challenges they have. So yeah, it's true. It needs to be all about the ideal client that you're trying to reach, not about yourself. Even though you do have to say, I provide this, you got to make it like you oriented copy and make it about them.
I was going to say that probably also means that you have to find the right language, right? The right words, the right copy to hit that person. I was going to say hit that person on the head, but to target the person's
metaphorically speaking,
the ideal customers that you like.
Yeah,
I think actually I'm going to do another edit to my front page. I've got it in front of me now, going, this is a dangerous time to. But one of the things that I realized was more convincing to clients when I talked about results than even when I said the words interpreting and translation. I came to this really sad realization that most of the clients that I want to work with don't know what an interpreter is. And so making my front page about interpreting is actually a bad move. Making my front page about getting them results when they have multilingual meetings or international meetings, that's the right move. So now when people ask what I do, the first thing I say is I don't say that I'm an interpreter. I say I help businesses to grow internationally. And then they go, oh, how do you do that? Then you can say you're an interpreter. And it's taken me so long to get that. You'd think I'd be smart enough to get it earlier, but it's taken me a long, long time to realize when you're networking, don't make interpreter or translator the first thing that you say when someone asks, what do you do? That sounds odd, but it just works.
But I think it's also a question of the approach, because I think that approach, you just sold it really well, and I think that can also really work. But for me, my approach for the new website, when I decided that I wanted to make a new website, I had two things in mind. I wanted to make it very visual, just because a lot of interpreter and translator websites aren't. So that was like my main focus, that it was very visual. And also I wanted to make sure that it's premium, both in its appearance and also in the content, because fact is that interpreting, especially conference interpreting, costs a lot of money. So I wanted the client to know that what they're looking at is not cheap, just by the look and feel of the website. So that's kind of where I was operating from. And that's why for me, I do mention that, I'm a conference interpreter and I do this and that, whatever, on the homepage. But then I go into what you guys were just discussing as well, what can I do for the clients? And then I break it down for them. So I think you have to decide what your approach is, kind of like this is going to sound very metaphysical, but like kind of your philosophy on your website, like what you want it to represent, and then you go into that. Because I think there are various really valid ways of doing it, but kind of figuring it out as you go is only going to make the process longer and more cumbersome than it needs to be, I think.
Yeah,
does that make any sense?
Definitely. It does. I think that there's a way to appeal to clients, that especially premium clients versus, the opposite. There really is a big difference between the two. I'm always trying to tell my colleagues, stop writing about the fact that you're saving them money or you're doing this or that. And it's not always about the price. They want to know that you're the best person for them to hire. It's not always the fact that you're affordable. That's not the key, or saying, you're providing free such and such. Stop talking about price right up front and really get to the point of what you provide to them. And your copy and your images can really portray that. I agree with that. Yeah.
I did a marketing course once, and she said you lead with value, not with service. And I thought that's a really interesting thing of, if you lead with value first, and it's now I do a lot of writing for magazines, and I've realized with them, leading with something that I know they want is far more valuable than leading with, look at who I've written for. And it's that switch of put what they want first, and then you can talk about, what you offer and all that. And it's hard to get to that because we love our work so much. We almost fall in love with it. And so to kind of stand back and put our business head on and say, what do my clients actually want? What is it they're actually buying? Okay, that's what goes on my website.
Yeah. They're not waking up going, hey, today I want to, hire a translator. I want to hire an interpreter. They're saying, no, today I have to figure out how the heck I'm going to talk to this person across the world, and figure this out and have this meeting, or get somebody for a conference, that specializes in this, technical area that is not easy to find. Exactly.
It brings me back. There was a question on Instagram today. They were talking about interpreting. Is it? Do you see your interpreting as an art or as a technical science? And I wrote back and went, neither. I see it as a business. And they went, oh, you're being so clinical. It's like, no. Bottom line is, I'm not here to interpret for me. I'm here to interpret for my clients. So whether it's an art or a science really isn't important. What that does for my clients is way more important, and that should be driving my decisions.
And also the fact that you have to pay your rent with it is also just, not unimportant, I would say.
Indeed. Yeah. But what does that mean in terms of content? So how do we make sure that the client gets the memo, basically? Is it just copy? Should that be, I don't know, I sometimes see audio samples or photos of people on assignments. What about that kind of stuff?
That's something that I think about a lot, because one of the things that comes up often is there are translators and maybe interpreters too, but I talk to more translators these days, and they tell me that they want to start blogging and they want to put it on their website. And I'm just going, wait a minute, is this blog for your clients or is this blog for colleagues? This is two different things. Your colleagues are not paying your bills. So if you're going to be appealing to your clients, these are the people who you need to be writing content for that's valuable to them, that they're going to feel engaged with, so that they come to the conclusion, this person knows what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. I need to hire this person versus another person who has maybe similar services. Something else that I keep asking the interpreters who take my course to do is to have a video sample on their website, either on the homepage or their about page, of them speaking, so that the person who could be hiring them next actually sees them. They hear their voice, they hear the way that they talk and how they pronounce things. And it's something that, I think who better than interpreters to do that. But it definitely needs to be coming across more on every page of somebody's website. Whatever is there needs to be valuable for the client, first and foremost. And sometimes that's hard to do because translators are not used to working this way. Interpreters probably even less, because they're working every day with spoken language. So to portray, what it is they do and the value that they provide is not an easy thing to do at first. But when you start to actually sit back and wonder, like, how can I talk about this? The best way I can think of to do this is to use words your clients would use. If you have testimonials from clients, use those. Portray that on your website. Use the words that are used in the industry that you tend to work in, or the industries you tend to work in, and not things that we would say, right? There's probably a lot of examples we could think of that we see on translators'
so many, yeah.
websites. Yeah, and it's just one of those things that you go and you think, okay, a client will not even know what that is. And I even had an interesting conversation the other day. So I'm glad I'm talking to you guys, because somebody said to me, would it make sense at all as an interpreter to put any keywords on my website with the word translator? Because a lot of clients think that interpreters are called translators. And I thought that was a very interesting concept. You'd have to be real careful about how you did that, right? But at the same time, it's really paying attention to the way that customers speak. And that's a controversial issue, I know, as far as like what, I'm not saying you should go call yourself a translator when you're an interpreter.
Right.
But pay attention to the way that customers speak, because that really informs your copy a lot.
Definitely. I have just one quick data point on this, because this has been a discussion in AIC for a few years, and the main website of AIC, of this international association, actually has, let me just check this. It says in the title, AIC interpreters are professionals who translate orally between over 60 languages. And I know there's been a lot of cooling about this, because people say it's not a translation, it's not translation, it's interpreting. But I'm assuming they've tested this and it just works better, I guess. So why not do it?
My take is I would definitely use that in things like your SEO keywords. And some of the posts that I've noticed there are two kinds of posts that do well. So I try to blog more on my website. I try to blog more and more for clients. Just occasionally I've written more stuff for interpreters, just because of topics that came up, and because I'd written about clients, I'd written something for clients and I had to clarify. And so when I'm writing for clients, I try to think, okay, what questions would clients ask? And the two kinds of posts that have done the best on my blog have either been really basic kind of first day of university posts, which do you need, a translator or an interpreter? And in that case, you've got a great opportunity to put SEO keywords in there. Or are speech translation gadgets any good? Again, you've got an excuse there. But the other type of post that's done even better has been when I've been talking about something going on in my client's world. And then it's easier for you to just use the word interpreter, because the attraction to that post is not translator or interpreter. The attraction to that post is it's a post on exporting, and it's a post on something in their world, international conferences, and that's what has drawn them. So then if you use interpreter in that post, you don't have to choose as much, if that makes sense. Whereas if you're writing, and I think there is a place for, if your clients need them, for an explainer post, I wouldn't dedicate an entire page to it, but a quick explainer blog post written in an engaging style, you will get people coming, just because, my best performing post ever was explaining the difference between translation and interpreting, but in a way that made sense to clients. Mm-hmm. And that's still my top performing post ever. And I've seen kind of other translators and interpreters share that and say, oh, this is what my clients need to know. It's like, fine. And it's the little explainers do really, really well and actually get you opportunities to do stuff that wouldn't otherwise exist.
The topic of blogs is interesting to me, because I know, I don't know if that's still the case, but I seem to remember that there was this recommendation always, yeah, you need to have a blog on your website because it keeps the website fresh, and SEO, search engine optimization. Always careful with the acronyms. But then I sometimes look at these blogs and think, it's actually not very interesting. Is anybody reading this? Is this really worth all the trouble? So I don't know if that's really a recommendation that I would make. So I'm really wondering if it's that important for keeping your search results high up in Google. I don't know.
I think it's also,
if there's any research on that or any experience.
I think in general, when it comes to content, I think if you want to do a blog, that's fine, but make sure it's good. For me, like the rule that the rule that I tend to live by is I would prefer less content, but good content than just a smorgasbord of like mediocre stuff that's out there. And I think that goes for anything. It could be just like a random text on your webpage. It could be a blog. It could be pictures, because I know a ton of websites of a ton of colleagues who have like, smartphone pictures, like a little selfie in the booth, and that's like their professional picture on the website. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. Just get like a professional photographer like once in your life and
good headshot
on the website. Yeah, get a good headshot. So I think if you're doing a mediocre blog, you can update it every single day, and it's not really going to do much because people are going to go on there once. And I don't know. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in there real quick, but I do have just one more thing to say, because a lot of the times people only optimize their website. It could be like the front end, so what you see on the page, or it could be like the search engine optimization that you do in basically the back end of the website. But what they forget is that you can also do a lot for your website yourself. You can do Google My Business, you can do posts there, you can list it in a lot of regional directories, you can put it on your professional accounts for the ATA or the IEC or whatever. So all of that stuff helps your website as well. Even if you get it out there on social media and get a few clicks on there and get a little bit of interaction there, that helps as well. So I think a lot of times people just get focused on one particular measure. They're saying, I'm going to do a blog now. And then they do the blog every day, and it actually is not the greatest blog in the world. And they're still surprised and wondering why they're not getting a ton of visitors. But I think it has to be like a comprehensive approach that you take with your website.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of those things with blogging, I feel like if you're going to do it, you have to do it well. Just like anything that you're going to do consistently. So but it does not make sense to do something consistently if it's not done well, which is what you're saying. So, I mean, even if you're just going to blog once a month, make it a really good, comprehensive blog post rather than just producing content to produce content, because that's not going to boost anything over time. And it is a long-term game, really. I mean, blogging's been around a long time now, but it has shifted over the years. And so I would say that for somebody who's not quite sure if they want to blog, or I actually just suggested this morning. I was teaching, I'm teaching a copywriting course right now for Corinne McKay's, what is it called? Training for Translators, I think it's called. And somebody said, well, I'd like to blog, but she translates into English, so her clients tend to be in France. And she said, but I don't know that I should be blogging in French. And I said, look, if you don't want to be blogging in general, you don't really have to be doing that. There are other ways that you can build traffic to your website. I mean, one of the things we were talking about, like a frequently asked questions page, everybody thinks, well, that's kind of a boring page, right? But if you put the questions as headlines on the website, what you'll see is that people are searching these days using questions, right? They're searching with those voice assistants. They're searching in Google with full questions. And if you know the types of questions that your clients are actually asking, you can make that, even on just a little blurb about it. But if you have the right question in your headline, that's going to boost your results better than a mediocre blog post.
Totally.
So I want to tell a quick story just as we wrap this up. So some of the best working content I've ever written has been when I've left the house and gone to an event aimed at the kind of clients I want to work with, and then gone home and blogged about it. Honestly, blogged about it, not just said, "Well, wonderful event," because people can see through that. So I blogged about one event that was a good event, but really missed a trick with not mentioning languages and interpreting at all. So I wrote an honest blog post saying this was a really good event. The speakers were really good, but they didn't mention languages. I had been chatting to one of the organizers during the event anyway. Because of that post, they kind of retweeted that post and shared it themselves, which was great. It got me traffic. And then I got invited to do a webinar for the organization that ran the event, which again referred traffic back to my website. So writing not just about translation and interpreting, but writing about translation and interpreting in context that your clients care about, or in events that they've already been to, is a really, really powerful way to get useful traffic, because I don't think there's an interpreter on the planet who cared about the event that I was at, apart from me.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of potential clients who were at that event and would have seen, because I think it got sent out on a mailer as well, would have seen that post.
Mm-hmm.
So being in the places your clients are looking, which I think is a good segue into asking, are websites still really important when we've got association directories, or how do we make the two work together?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And actually, it reminds me of something you said earlier. It's, you did something earlier in your career and then you didn't have a website yet to drive that traffic to. But those backlinks are actually really, really important for driving more traffic to your website. And so the same thing with directory listings and associations. I mean, directory listings are wonderful. They're really helpful to have, but they provide a solid and high quality backlink. Google and the search engines, they actually consider those sites high quality most of the time because they have dynamic content. But when it's driving somebody to your website, you're actually sort of sending them down the path to, quote unquote, your home. So build the home first and the paths next to lead to it, right? But also it's just limited what you can put into those profiles usually.
Yes.
You can only put so much in there, but with your website, you can really, speak to a client, to the value that the client wants. Whereas with a profile, you're kind of limited, these are my language pairs, or these are my specializations, but you can only put so much. I mean, I've seen some people put like loads of content. I'm thinking nobody's reading that on a profile. The profile is really there for a quick glance, and then give me your contact information and I'll contact you.
Do you know what's really funny on that note? Just a quick comment, because IEG Germany did something really, really smart, I think. On the profile, on the membership profile, you can now list your website, but they will only allow that if you link to the IEG website, either to the full website or to your profile from your home page.
The link exchange is back. Yeah.
That is very smart.
So it's super smart, because now they all of a sudden have like 400 backlinks from the homepage. I mean, I put it, for example, in my footer. So for me, it's actually on every single page of my website. So it's really, really smart what they've done.
Yeah, and also with the logo, I mean, if you're using a logo that your association has for members,
yes,
like that's really important too. And I always tell people, don't just link to the website. If you have a profile there, link to your profile, because then it really shows the client that you are a professional and you're looking at your career overall. Yeah.
Sure. Now I'm wondering, the whole, I don't know if that's really related. I'm not a website expert, I guess, but how does this relate to like social media? And because I think that's a really interesting discussion and a very difficult question, because it gets into the question of which should I do social media, yes or no, in general, which network should I be on? Should it be more in a private capacity? Should it be for professional purposes? And I think it's a very messy sort of field. So I don't know if that's something that we want to get into necessarily.
For me, at least from a professional perspective, I think if you're going to be on social media, you need to be on the social media where your clients are. I see a lot of interpreters and translators who say, "Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't really get any business from LinkedIn." Well, that's not really the point, is to get the business from LinkedIn. The point of LinkedIn and other social media is to connect with people. And that's why they call them connections and things like that. So, but again, you need to be leading back to your website and providing value on these social media platforms to people who could potentially hire you or refer you to other people who could. There are lots of things, like LinkedIn is just a really good example. People are there to network professionally. That's what the platform is for, right? And so if you're connecting with people and actually providing value, maybe you send an article to somebody you just connected to that you think might be helpful to them, but you're not there selling your services. That type of conversation happens offline. It doesn't happen on LinkedIn, right? Or I know a couple of translators who use Instagram really, really well for their client base, but they're working with clients who are also on Instagram. They're selling.
That's nice.
In marketing, right? They're in the marketing industry. One is in fashion as well.
Fashion is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they are. They're on Instagram. So.
I was going to say, I've found that LinkedIn. So I'm beginning to think that we've made everything too granular. And instead of thinking, should I be on LinkedIn? Should I be on Twitter? Should I be on Instagram? Our question should be, who are the clients that we're after and where do they live and what works for them? and just strategize according to, I'm realizing that the direct clients I want to reach are on LinkedIn and they're really attracted to certain things. Okay, that's where I'm going. And realizing that, I'm having to re-strategize all the time with various things happening in the UK. And thinking, well, I'm not where I want to be with my marketing yet, but I'm getting more places than I have ever been before. I'm meeting more people and I'm able to link to people who I wouldn't have even attempted to link to, 2 months ago. Right. So what do we do then? Let's build a funnel is a horrible term, but let's build this and make this work. Knowing it's going to take time, knowing that I'm unlikely to get a phone call, Monday morning saying, here's a £5 million job. But I'm building the links to the people who now know where to look when they're looking for an interpreter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's important. And, for a while, I was wondering if Twitter was going to be around much longer. I know certainly from Word people, it'll be there for as long as we are on there. But for clients, especially, I kind of wondered that. And a lot of my clients weren't on there. But now some of my clients are on there because I work with editing agencies who hire translators as well. So that's one of the things that has shifted a bit. I mean, it kind of depends on how your client base shifts as well, because over time you may be working with a new area of clients they haven't thought about before, and they happen to be on these certain platforms. I think one platform nobody is probably on is TikTok, hopefully.
Oh my God, yeah.
Have you heard of that? I mean, it's the funniest thing. I still don't quite understand it, but I think we can all steer clear of that one.
Yeah, I think so. Unless you're going to go viral with like your
singing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's not going to happen. Or even Snapchat. Snapchat, I don't get either.
Snapchat is so 2018.
There's a new one. What's the one? There's a new kind of open source equivalent of Twitter.
Mastodon. Yeah.
Mastodon, which I
have never heard this.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Don't worry about it.
It's really kind of empty and vague at the moment. I joined just because I was like, what is this? And literally you'll maybe see a few messages a day. But on the other hand, when you do put something out, because there are so few people there, you'll tend to get a response every time. Unlike Twitter, where unless you get the tweet at just the right time with just the right hashtag, it's going to get ignored. And on Mastodon, it's like living in a village with 12 people.
That's too funny.
Well, if those 12 people are your clients, I can see it working. But otherwise, I don't think anybody really cares, right? It's interesting.
Just one quick pet peeve that I have as well about Twitter, because not about Twitter as a platform, but a lot of people, not so much anymore, actually. I think that's kind of very 2000 and late, is that people put their social media feeds on their websites. And so you go somewhere on the About page or something, and you see like all their tweets constantly updating or their Facebook posts. And it's just useless and really ugly. So I'm very glad that kind of stopped. So if you're doing that out there, and if you're listening, just stop it right now.
Yeah, I think that was the plugin that everybody had at one point that was just like, oh, sure, that looks good. And you add it and it's just not good. I think the only sites that really works for is like some like people who only do blogging, or people who are like retail maybe, or something, that are putting their products up. But that's about it. Yeah, it just doesn't look professional, I don't think, either.
Automation is dangerous, yeah.
Where we're talking about things not to do, can we just say, if you're a translator or an interpreter and I go to your website and the first thing that happens I get one of those horrible interstitials begging me to sign up for your newsletter, I'm never working with you again. It's just horrible,
like a pop-up?
offensive. Yeah, like the pop-up that comes straight up and says, get our newsletter. It's like, I know these work for some people in marketing, but they work because they annoy the fingers of everyone else. And it's like, to me, it gives a really bad impression. I've only ever seen a couple of translator and interpreter websites that do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was joking when I said they'll never work with you again, but the point is that if you're the kind of person who does that, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it makes me think, if I'm looking for an interpreter for someone and you've been recommended, it makes me think, that is really greasy and horrible.
But it also
maybe they're not that great.
It's also kind of like with the same with the blog. If you're gonna do a newsletter, and especially if you're so in your face, it better be the best damn newsletter ever. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you do that and then I subscribe and it ends up being like, hey, this month I did 5 translations. Great, good for you. Like what? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the pop-up is funny. That's something that they say works. Like statistically it works, but I have always felt like if it annoys me, why would I do that to my customers?
Totally.
But I guess it does work in some places. I feel like that type of thing only works when it comes with a discount offer attached to it or something. You know?
The definition of it works is people just fill in any email address to get rid of it.
Oh, right.
I have a dummy email address that, so like I have a dummy email address. So like if I have to connect with Wi-Fi, and even with GDPR, they're still asking for an email address, I give them my dummy address because I don't care, it's going to a dummy address anyway. And so I think we really need to it would be good to get a proper study, does that work? Not in terms of newsletter signups, but in terms of actually making more clients than, I don't know, being an approachable human being, which one works better?
Yeah. And some of them are actually hard to figure out how to X out of, how to close out, because the X is so tiny at the top, or it's a transparent one. You can't really see it. So I would just close the window completely. I would never give my email address if I thought I didn't have to. Yeah.
That is very true. It's also just about really how you navigate the website in general. Just because you said that with the X, a lot of the times, if I don't find the information on the website, I will look for, let's say, an email address. I will just click Control F and just like type in an @ or like whatever I'm looking for. If I don't find it in 30 seconds, I'm out. Like, that's just it. So just make sure that your website is clear and like easy to navigate, and the information is where people expect it to. Because sometimes people think, I'm going to be really clever and different, which, can be fine, but don't be that. If it's about, where's my contact? Where is your phone number? Where's your email address? Like, that stuff needs to be where everybody can find it easily, and don't be like special about that.
I was going to say, have a page that says contact. Really easy.
Yeah, just yes, please. But I think before we wrap this up, I just want to throw it over to Alex real quick, because I do wonder, and we also have this in the show notes, if you think if there's a value in having a professional website if you're a staffer or if you're employed, because I know for a fact that you have multiple websites going, so I'm sure there's a reason for that.
Well, I have only one
for you,
personal page. Yeah, the others are sort of byproducts of projects I'm involved in.
Tech-forward websites.
See what you did there. No, I mean, I think I can't speak for everyone, but in my case, it was more of I had always had a private website even before I became a staffer, so I just kept it around. And just like Jonathan, I'm somebody who likes to share opinions, so a personal website is still a very good place to do that online. And I've never been somebody who wanted to put all of their eggs in somebody else's basket. So on social media or like a platform like Medium, for example, I always wanted to have my own domain and also my own website, even if it's on a hosted platform like Squarespace. So I always had my own home on the web, and that's something that I've just always had, and I kept it around, and I've always used it for different things. So for blogging, just having a place on the web that people can find out about me, for example, and also for the podcast and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's necessary, and I suppose there are a lot of people who don't really want to do that, but for me it was kind of always important. And even as a staffer, of course, we have freedom of expression, so we can share our own opinions and stuff like that, and I want to keep doing that. So that's why I'm keeping the website, and it's always been a sort of a hobby, something that I like to spend time on, waste time on, whatever you want to call it. But these days it's really about just putting content out there, putting stuff out there, not so much about trying out new technical things or improving my HTML skills or things like that. So
you don't code?
Nah, not so much.
I was going to ask a question, because this comes up time and again, and it's one that I'm still puzzling over myself. As a lot of interpreters, you talk about websites, you talk about marketing, and they say, how can I possibly compete with the big agencies that can, throw thousands of pounds a month at Google Ads? Is there an answer to that, or do we have to ask them, do you need to compete? What's the answer if someone says, how do I build a website that's actually going to be found when all these agencies are throwing so much money at everything?
Mm-hmm. For me, I feel like, why are we competing with them in the first place? I mean, that's not...
That's a mic drop. I love it.
Well, but honestly, I mean, why would we? Because we serve different roles in the industry, in our professions. I get what you're saying about as far as putting money into advertising and things like that. But if you really know your clients well and who's hiring you and who you want to work with, you can actually do way better than an agency, because agencies are really looking to advertise to larger groups of people. Many times in various specializations. But let's say you're the only conference interpreter that works in this certain area that has conferences all over the world the whole year long. I mean, you have a really good position that you can play into by making sure that your online presence reflects that, and you're doing all the things that we already talked about as far as showing what the value is of hiring somebody like you. Maybe producing content that's valuable to them, that brings them to the conclusion that they want to hire you, versus an agency, which, you've seen even some of the agency websites probably as well. They read like a brochure.
Yes.
It doesn't tell a client a whole lot. Now, yeah, they do have money to do ads and things like that. I actually do know a colleague here who told me that she's working on, I think she's using LinkedIn ads. And I told her to follow up with me because I think that's really interesting. I want to know what happens with it. Her husband works in the area of online ad space. And so she's already seeing clicks, but I don't know if any have converted into clients yet. So it's a really interesting concept, but we have the ability to be more narrow in who we look at versus too wide and trying to please everybody. I mean, that's what I think anyway.
Very true. Very true.
That sounds like it's something very difficult for people new in the profession. I mean, it's difficult enough because you have to find your way and find clients, and everybody's telling you to maybe specialize. And I think that goes sort of hand in hand with finding the right audience that you want to, target online. So I don't know if you have any tips or if there's some good advice for people who are really new in the profession and where to, because it's so overwhelming. Where do you start? Where do you look first?
Yeah. So I actually had this conversation with a translator recently. She's, I think she does Arabic to English. And so she really wanted to stand out, but she wanted to make sure that her website would work well for clients who would look for her for, documents for individuals, especially here in the US. I mean, you can get a lot of work Arabic to English, I assume, in that area. But also she had a couple of specializations she was sort of dabbling in because she was new. I mean, so she wasn't quite sure where she was going. I said, well, you first really need to know what kind of client you need to, look at. In order to write copy, you need to know who you want to work for. And of course, that's part of the process. She didn't really know yet, right? And it's like, okay, well, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? Look at it that way. I mean, do you want somebody who's going to be asking you for super quick turnaround times all the time? Or do you want somebody who's going to say, okay, I need this, next week. So can you put this, in your queue for translation? Well, then maybe in that sense, you might want to work more with direct clients than agency clients. It could be that, there are a lot of ways to look at it, but, I mean, I know for sure she's still figuring it out, but she's very bright and she's doing quite a bit of research, and she's still working alongside building her website, but it kind of shifts over time. I think probably all of us could say that over the years, our client base has maybe shifted because our priorities tend to shift too. And when we find something that we really do well, or we're really into this topic or area of specialization, then we tend to put more emphasis there. And that's something that comes with time, but it's not just always about where can I make money or where can I, what will, get me off the ground faster. It's not necessarily that, because if you don't do it well, then it's not going to go very far.
But that's certainly one of the sort of biggest lessons that I'm drawing from this, is to say that a website is a living thing. It's not something that you do it, you tick it off the to-do list, and then it just stays there. It's like a continuous project. It needs to be updated. The design needs to be refreshed. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not every year, but from time to time. And I think it's probably fine starting small, just having something and then building on that over time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think so. Especially if you're, showing who you are, that you're a trustworthy professional, that you kind of, are a responsive person. You have a contact page. It's easy to figure out where to find you and to get in touch with you, and that you have, some sense about what you're doing. I think that stuff comes with time, as far as, really honing your message for your particular client base. Yeah.
I would also really urge people to integrate everything that we've said about their website into this journey as to what clients do you want and where do they live. I'm realizing now that, and someone was saying to me recently, the business cards are disappearing, but realizing that your website is kind of like your virtual business card, in the sense that, you know, if you meet someone, you can give someone a card that's got your website on it, the likelihood, you know, they might come back and take a look, and having some presence helps. And gradually, as you do more and more things, it becomes easier for that presence to build. So I got to the point where now, if someone Googles my name, I don't know if it's on every version of Google, but certainly on Google UK, a little info box on me pops up on the right-hand side.
Ooh,
And that's just
that.
in like the past 6 months, that's just appeared on google.co.uk, and they were like, and you get to alter that. And so that changes now how things appear. But that comes with, you know, being in the right places, gradually building stuff up. And your website, I don't know about anyone else's experience,
Look
but
at this.
I know, I'm just doing it too. I see it.
My website hasn't gained me any clients, but it has been part of the journey towards gaining clients. I've had my newest interpreting client, who I really love, got referred to me and looked on my website before they sent me an email. And I was like, I don't think I've ever gained a client through my website, but it's been a really important part of the brand that I'm building. I hate the word brand, but, you know, it's been a very important part of my presence online.
Interesting. I do hear from people that their website is what was the deciding factor for some people to call them or hire them. Cool. I know that there's actually a misconception that agency project managers don't look at people's websites, but they do. They definitely do. So I think that people have to, you know, think twice if they're going to say, well, I don't need a website because I only have agency clients. That's not necessarily true. The good agencies are looking at your website. They're making sure that you're legitimate, that you know, keep up with your profession, that you do specialize in what you say you can specialize in, especially if it's some obscure thing. They want to make sure that you are, you know, at least somewhat visible to them online, other than just having an email address, especially if it happens to be one of those at like at yahoo.com. They're going to find, you know, they're going to try to at least look you up more than just a directory. But it's back to what Alex said earlier about, you know, having an online presence that's not just owned by someone else. That's always the thing, you know. What if LinkedIn is gone tomorrow? What if your online directory listing, you know, tanks tomorrow? The association is gone or whatever. You know, can't just depend on these that other people own. You have to have something that you own and lead everything else back to it.
I think that's a really nice wrap up.
Yeah.
I think that just kind of like really puts a nice bow on everything.
Absolutely, yeah. And I really enjoyed this discussion. I was actually thinking beforehand, you know, maybe that's a little bit less relevant to me because I'm not really using my website to, you know, attract business or anything. But yeah, I really enjoyed this discussion and sort of thinking back to the days when I got started on the web with, you know, HTML and stuff like that, which was a lot of fun.
Hacker man.
Yeah, definitely white hat hacker though. Excellent. So if people are interested, where could they learn more about your courses, for example, because you provide training on websites?
Yeah, so I have a website that is geared just towards working with colleagues. It's just my name, Madalena, Zampaulo.com, which is really hard to spell if you don't know me, so you can link to it, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Madalena, for joining us tonight and sharing a lot of insights. I suppose there's still enough stuff that would be interesting for people and a reason to join your courses. So we didn't spoil too much the fun that you guys have. So I encourage people to check out what you have to offer and keep working on that website.
Thank you.
Yeah, cut.
And I'm thinking, how else can I tap into what people are talking about and use that? You know, someone said to me, it's better to walk into a room that's already full than to try and fill a room.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
I thought,
just like it's easier to get a client to contract somebody they already know they need than to try to sell somebody something that they aren't quite sure that they need at all.